In the 1970s, Walter Mischel began the psychological experiment that we all know and love, and which became one of the most famous psychological experiments of all time. He was curious about the relationship between a young child's patience, their ability to wait for something they wanted, and their ultimate ability to create a successful life. To conduct his experiment, he sat 4-year-olds in front of a marshmallow and told them they had a choice. They could eat that marshmallow with all its sugary goodness right away, or they could wait. And if they could wait 15 minutes, the researcher would give them an additional marshmallow. The videos from this experiment are utterly delightful. We've all seen them. We've all chuckled watching little children trying to restrain themselves, to hold themselves back from that delicious marshmallow staring at them. We've all laughed watching their resolve waver. You can see it in their eyes, the thoughts moving across their eyes. I could just sneak a little teeny tiny taste, looking surreptitiously around the room, picking up the marshmallow, nibbling just a little bit at the bottom, or just licking the top a little bit, hoping no one notices, and they can still get that extra treat. Some kids try to distract themselves, hiding their eyes or looking over their shoulder or kicking the table or doing whatever they can to keep themselves from eating that marshmallow so they can get their treat. Mischel demonstrated in these studies that there is a correlation between a child's ability to restrain themselves in that situation, to wait for the additional marshmallow, and the pattern of their lives. Turns out that the little kids who could wait in that study would go on to have SAT scores that were 210 points higher on average than their peers who could not wait. They were more likely to graduate from college and significantly more likely to land a more lucrative job. Conversely, the little children who could not wait for that extra marshmallow were more likely to be incarcerated and more likely to struggle with substance abuse and addiction. Well, Mischel also showed something very interesting, which was that a child's ability to be patient wasn't a static quality, but that children could be taught over time strategies to become more and more patient, which led parenting experts and teachers to believe that the single best way to help your child might just be to practice and teach them how to become more and more patient. This week, as Governor Berger revealed his plans for reopening the state of Massachusetts, I felt very much like one of those children in the marshmallow experiment. Here we are. We have been living alone, stranded in isolation, seeing each other only from behind masks or behind screens. Suddenly we come in and the governor says, you can have the ultimate treat. You can come back together again. You can be together, but you have to wait a little bit. If you wait, if you can be very patient and maintain your social distancing and your social vigilance, then maybe, just maybe, we will get the ultimate treat of togetherness that is not coupled with a resurgence of this virus. But if we cannot wait, if we don't listen to the epidemiologists and virologists and the science, which tells us of the very real risk of this virus, then we may face a consequence much stronger, much harsher, much worse than this shutdown. Tell you what, I feel for those kids in the experiment. I want to taste that marshmallow. I just want a taste of togetherness. I want to go walking down the street and give a hug to my friends. I want to go to the grocery store and pick up fruit and smell it. I want to go out on the beach and lay out in the sun and pass bags of potato chips back and forth with friends and family and go for walks without worrying about keeping 6 foot of difference. I don't want to keep my mask in my car. And yet, I recognize and I see just how important it is to remain vigilant, to be patient. I want that extra marshmallow. How do we gather our strength? How do we marshal our own willpower to be able to be present in this moment, to take care of each other, and to make sure that we are protected for the future? In that original study, Michel found something very interesting. Turns out that the children who were able to be most patient thought of the marshmallow not as a marshmallow, but imagined it was a cloud or a fairy or a snowball. And when they thought of the marshmallow in this way, not as a food, it was much easier to resist the temptation of the marshmallow. Maybe that's the secret for this moment. Maybe we can marshal this kind of thinking. Maybe we can change the way we imagine reality now that will help us to be patient and help us to invest in the practices which will enable us to emerge safely from this pandemic. Let me give you an example. My teacher, Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld, president of Hebrew College, suggests that we should change the way we talk about this period. We shouldn't say social distancing. That's not what this is about. Maybe, she says, maybe we should call it social discretion. Or maybe contact-free connection. Because after all, our goal in this period is not to create social distance. The opposite. We're working very hard in every way we can to maintain connections and to be together. But we do want to be aware of how our physical presence could hurt someone else and to be very conscious of how we can keep each other safe. Are there other creative ways that we could reshape our thinking that might help us to reshape our reality? Turns out that this practice of altering our language or altering our thought patterns in order to affect the way we experience the world around us has ancient roots. And not so ancient roots. If you've ever been to see a magic show, I'll bet you've seen a magician say, Abra Kadabra, as they wave their wand and pull a rabbit out of a hat. There are many people who believe that abracadabra actually has its origins in an ancient Aramaic phrase, abracadabra. I create as I speak, or it happened as I said it would. In other words, true magic isn't about changing reality, but about changing how we perceive reality. In other words, it might be that if we were able to rethink and change the way that we perceive reality, that too might affect what is on the ground. This is so true, and so true in Jewish literature. When God wanted to create the world, God didn't get out a toolbox, a hammer and nails and physical things. God spoke. God said, Vayehi or, let there be light. And when God spoke, light came to be. Each one of us is created in God's image. Each one of us has the capacity for creative thinking, for creative speech. What would it look like if we marshaled this superpower? I want to ask you a question. How have you been speaking about this shutdown? How have you been thinking about your summer, your vacation? Is there a shift you could make? A change that you could make in your speech, in your imagination, that might open up more joy, more opportunity in your world? Let me share a story with you. There's a guy that lives in East New York. His name is Bradley Harder. Now, Bradley Harder is a super social guy. He's the kind of guy that lives for social interaction. He loves those incidental moments when you open up your apartment door and you see somebody down the way and you get to chatting and then you get to talk with somebody else. When the pandemic began to rise, Bradley was worried. He was super worried. He was worried, on the one hand, for his physical health. He's 60 years old and struggles with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and a host of other physical ailments that made him clear that if he were to get this virus, it could be deadly. So he's worried about his health, but he was also really worried about what it would be like for him to take the measures needed to protect his health and the health of those around him. The loneliness factor. He's a super social person, and the idea of being all alone, he thought that would create potentially all sorts of different health risks for him, on top of what he was already facing physically. And as he worried and fretted about this shutdown, he realized he needed to change his frame of mind. Instead of thinking about this as a shutdown, instead of thinking about this as a time which kept him away from the people he loved most, he decided he needed to think about it as an adventure. He decided that he should create some kind of cool project that would get him from the shutdown mentality to adventure mentality, and realized that he'd always wanted to host a cooking show. So he decided to start streaming videos out of his kitchen. He called the series Cooking Without Pants, and delighted in turning on his video camera every night and cooking up delicious recipes, showing people his favorite techniques in the kitchen, and then sharing a meal with friends digitally. He loved watching the numbers go up as people signed in to watch his show, loved seeing their comments and their pictures as they ate food with him. And he found that his gift for social connection was still there in the digital world. He created such a powerful connection with his viewers that in one episode, when he offhandedly mentioned that he was running out of raw ingredients to make his delicious feasts, the next morning he woke up to find groceries on his front porch. So he decided to bake a pie in gratitude. That began the epic pandemic pie project. To date, during this pandemic, Bradley has made more than 200 pies from scratch. Some he gives as thank yous for the many people who are keeping him supplied with groceries. Others he shares with friends. Still others he gives to those who are in need of being cheered up. As he says, there's nothing quite like a warm pie. He says, it's like a warm hug from your mom. It's just love. You can't eat a pie without a smile on your face. That's my philosophy, and I'm sticking to it. Bradley has managed to transform a time that is filled with challenge into a time that is, in his words, ooey, gooey, and delicious. A time of struggle into a time of adventure, and not just for himself. He's ignited the spark of giving and connection in his community. Because of him, his neighbors are thinking about how they can dial in to their own talents to give back. Because of him, his neighbors are thinking about how to express their gratitude. They're leaving not just food on his doorsteps, but sending him music videos of songs, stories of how his pies have changed their life. We can't all bake pies, but we can all transform the raw ingredients of this summer into something delicious. Abracadabra, abracadabra, abracadabra. What will you do? What will you say to make something sweet? Please rise, page 184.